The Girl Who Chased Away Sorrow. The Diary of Sarah Nita, a Navajo Girl. New Mexico, 1864. Written by Anne Turner. We hear a bolt of sound. Both grandmother and I are keeping track of our people who die on the journey. It was a little boy so ragged he couldn't survive the cold. He was left by the wayside. 2 old women behind us sank into the snow, unable to go on. I can see grandmother's fingers fanning out. More than 5, including Desba. Many we don't know are so weakened by sickness they cannot go on. Their crumpled bodies in the snow look small and huddled as children. This day there is a woman big with child behind us. I do not know her name. Her husband and mother, I think, are supporting her as she struggles to keep up. With one hand pressed to her belly, she shakes her head. Aunt knows that the baby is coming and runs to ask the Nakai if we can stop until the woman gives birth. But when she returns, we know the answer is no. Farther behind, the woman drops until I cannot see her at all. Then a soldier comes galloping down the line, his red hair sticking out from his hat. It is Hotface, and he disappears around a bend in the land. Only we hear a sudden bolt of sound. Grandfather stops. That isn't... They couldn't. Grandfather and uncle use an evil word. Tears roll down grandmother's cheeks as Partridge Girl plucks at her dress. What happened? What is it? The rest of us know that the blue soldier shot the woman, that it is easier to shoot than to help. My knees wobble as I walk. I dare not stop now. I dare not slow down. They might shoot me if I do. I try to tell a story. When we stop that night, we call it the day of the first evil shooting. We move like elders with stiff arms and legs. Kaiba gathers firewood slowly and brings it back with dragging feet. Slim Woman cooks flour on the hot stones, but her fingers fumble the bread and it falls into the fire to be charred to cinders. Aunt is not rocking Starlight in her arms, but just sits gazing dully into the fire. Sani and her mother and grandfather are even quieter. No one talks. Silvercoat knows we are sad, sitting so close to us that his bottom is on our feet. Even that does not cheer me. Kaiba touches my wrist gently. Tell us a story, please, Serenita. We need a story. A story is the last thing I am thinking about. It is the kind of thing that comes from that other girl who lived in a long ago, faraway place with her mother and father. Those days are gone. I shake my head. My lips are too numb to even speak. Then grandfather lifts his head, eyes gleaming in the firelight. He tells us about the creation of our world, how the holy people cupped the mountains in their hands, like a potter her clay. How they set the 4 sacred mountains to be boundaries for the Dineta. How the 3 rivers surrounded us. His voice rings out in the stillness. One day we will once again live in beauty, the way we were meant to. Aunt sighs and begins to rock her baby as I sit by the fire, gnawing on my beef. If I had a turkey wing, like my mother had to fan our fire at home, I would fan that spark inside me until it blazed up. Today it is not blazing. It is a small red glow only kept alive by grandfather's words. The fearful crossing. There is a dark slash in the land ahead of us. Grandfather turns and calls back. It is the Rio Grande, the last river around the Nita. People grumble in the line around us. They know no good can come to us after we cross the river. I peer ahead. It looks like high banks sloping down to the river. I only hope it will not be too deep. It feels as if all of us are like a horse, bunching its hindquarters to leap over an arroyo. People cluster closer together. Soldiers are shouting, wheeling their mounts, herding us to the bank. The first ones spill over the edge, slipping and sliding down to the river. All is confusion, noise, shouting. Animals bleat and try to run away, afraid to enter the water. At the edge of the water, grandmother hesitates. I am afraid, husband. Afraid. He reassures us that it should not be too deep and tells us to follow him. Holding grandmother's hand, he strides into the water, driving our sheep, and we follow. We have to. There is no other choice. Kaiba holds my left hand, and Sani the other. Partridge Girl grips her mother's dress with Uncle beside. He is holding on to my other aunt with Starlight strapped to her back. Sani's mother and grandfather are close by, shivering as the water rushes over their feet. The water makes me gasp, cold, piercing, like a sharp knife. It slices at my feet, my legs. Sani cries out, gripping me tighter as our feet slip on the bottom. Kaiba yells as he trips and stumbles, but I pull her up. It is like being in a whirlwind of bad spirits, the noise of the animals, soldiers shouting, the river rushing. When I look back, I cannot see Aunt or Starlight. Only the black water rippled where I last saw them. Uncle is thrashing at the water with his arms, looking, but he slips and falls in too. Aunt! Aunt! I scream. Grandfather is too far ahead to hear, and Uncle is trying to get his footing. I am afraid to leave Kaiba with the water pushing against her waist. Suddenly, Kaiba opens her mouth and screams, Come here! William! Off to our side, a mounted soldier wheels his horse and splashes back toward us. It is Micah Eyes. He grabs Kaiba's hand and pulls her up onto his mount. Dismounting, he hands the reins to me and dives where Kaiba points, again and again. His hat floats downstream, and a horse tugs at the reins. Again he plunges under the water, and on the third try, he brings Aunt up to the surface. Quickly, he tears the wet blanket from her back and slaps the baby's cheeks. She howls, loud, rising howls, and Micah Eyes thumps Aunt on her chest. Bent over, she coughs and retches, and a long stream of water spurts out of her mouth. Hauling her behind him, Micah Eyes whips a rope around Aunt's middle, tying it to his saddle. He grabs the reins from me and surges forward through the icy water. I am so numb I can hardly move, but I must. Calling on Changing Woman to give me strength, I slip, almost fall, and then get my balance. Forward, I push through the current, until the water slips down below my knees, and I know I'm near the shore. When I reach it, people are kneeling on the ground, calling out to each other. Some are lost, drowned in the river. Aunt is leaning against the horse, with Kaiba still mounted. Micah Eyes unrolls his pack and takes out a dry blanket. Stripping off Aunt's clothes, he wraps her in warm wool. Aunt looks stunned, unable to speak, and I hold Starlight in her wet cradle board. She must be dry too, or she will get sick. Up! Up! The soldiers urge us over the bank. Once there, they stop and build fires so we can dry ourselves. No one seems able to speak except Kaiba. Slipping down from the horse, she takes Micah Eye's hand and squeezes it. Think, she says. I don't know what it means, but he does. He raises a finger to touch his hat and smiles when he realizes it is gone. This is the second time that Micah Eyes has rescued us, and I am beginning to think Sister is right, that he has no dark winds inside of him. But I have to ask Kaiba a question. What were those strange words you used that brought Micah eyes to us? Come here means to come to us and help, and William is his name. William. It sounds like a wind, or a swift and furry animal. A happiness comes. We sit by the fires, drying ourselves. Sani unwraps the wet cloth from Starlight and tucks a rug around her. Aunt is too tired and cold to nurse, but at least we are safe. For a moment, I look back at that river that almost took my aunt and her baby. Someone is still crossing. Someone was left behind. It is a boy wrapped in a blanket, herding 2 goats ahead of him. Suddenly he slips and falls into the water. Then he is up again, moving forward. Gripping Kaiba's hand, I ask her to look behind, to tell me what she sees. It's High Jumper! We race back to the riverbank and get there as he and the 2 goats climb up to the top. With a great shout, I leap forward and grasp his arms. Smiling, he says, Yata hey, Nita. You're back! You're all right! I say over and over as we walk to our fire. Grandmother hurries up, hugging him tightly to her chest. Grandfather grabs his other arm. His father and mother pat his back until he completely disappears in a group of shouting, hugging people. Silvercoat stands, nose pointed, making sure that the bad goat does not make a bolt for freedom. The good goat stands there, head hanging. Now, if the goats aren't too exhausted, Aunt will have milk again for Starlight. But we must wait for the food that comes with darkness before High Jumper can tell us his story. High Jumper tells about his journey. Somehow Aunt manages to stumble on for the last march of the day. Exhausted, she sits by the fire, holding a wailing Starlight and crooning to her. Kaiba and I milk the goats. There is enough to fill a small bowl, and we take it back. Grandmother tilts the bowl so Starlight can drink. Though some spills on her, enough gets in, so Starlight quiets and finally sleeps. Huddled next to our fire, we sit on rugs waiting to hear High Jumper's tale. After our portion of beef and flour, he sits between his mother and father, pushing the hair back from his face. He tells us that he couldn't let those people who smelled like dogs done take our goats, that he followed them over some hills to a sheltered place where they made a camp for the night. What noise they made, High Jumper says. Kaiba wonders about the children who were stolen. Were they all right? And my friend answers that the raiders did not treat the children cruelly, that they were fed. He wished he could have rescued the 3 boys and 2 girls, but all he could do was get our goats back. When it was dark and their guards were talking together, High Jumper took our goats from the herd of stolen animals. He put his hands around their noses so they could not bleat and led them away from camp. He found that by sleeping between them at night he could keep warm, and there were piñon nuts under the snow to eat, as well as goat's milk to drink. Grandfather lifts some food to all 4 directions, thanking the holy people that his grandson is back. High Jumper's mother sits close beside him, handing him pieces of cooked meat and smiling. For a short time, we are happy. We head for the fort. Grandmother stops to make fry bread and mutton stew. She says she needs strength for the rest of the telling, that just remembering makes her tired. I am tired with her, for my pencil has been flying over the pages for days. Grandmother says she will not tell me everything that happened, because it would take too long and my book would have no more pages left. But she says that after all of their people crossed the last river, the blue soldiers took them north, past a white man's town called Albuquerque. They had to go that way so they could find firewood to burn and water for people and animals. They went through gorges and over mountains until at last they crossed the river Pecos and marched south to Fort Sumner. Shimazani throws a piece of mutton into the fire and says angrily, "It wasn't a fort. It was a prison." The meat sizzles into a bright flame, and I think it is like the flame that is in my grandmother's heart. We come to the fort. Soldiers ride up and down our long group, pushing us together, yelling commands. Micah Eyes trots past, touching a finger to his new hat, and Kaiba calls out a greeting. Hello! I hate that she knows the white man's words. Soon, the people at the end of the line call back that they can see the fort. The fort! The fort! The fort! Passes back down the long, straggling line. As we hurry forward, ahead of us are some low, dusty-looking buildings in a circle of green trees. On either side, land stretches out flat as a rug, pricked with green. They herd us into a large dirt area, taking our animals to a corral. But High Jumper will not let them take our goats, holding on to them and glaring at the soldiers. No, he shouts in their language. No! Sit down! Sit down! The Nakai shouts, running from group to group like a skinny herd dog, full of his own importance. Kaiba and I whisper to each other, Sit down, sit down. The words feel funny and strange, like stones in my mouth. I am shivering, waiting until I can get up to go look for my family. But the soldiers go from group to group, writing things on small white squares in their hands. Grandfather cannot believe they are counting us, as if we were sheep they've just brought in from the land. The soldiers do not look happy. Hotface is one of the soldiers counting our people. His mouth turns downward and his eyebrows bunched together. Even Micah Eyes looks worried as he talks to another soldier nearby. Grandmother wonders how many of our people are at this place of soldiers. Nearby are shelters made by our people who are already here. Lopsided tents, things made of cedar bark and old blankets. One with a fresh cowhide draped over some poles, and others that look dug into the ground, like burrows with brush roofs. Some women are sweeping the ground near their tents while children play in the dirt. I stand up suddenly, looking for Shideji, for Swift Pony, among the children. Is that woman bending over a sagebrush broom my mother? No. She looks too thin, too frail. But Hotface motions me down again, and I sit hurriedly, afraid of what he might do to me. This is the beautiful place by the river, High Jumper hisses into my ear. My skin prickles, as if an evil wind is blowing. How could it be worse here? It must be better. It must be. And as soon as these crazy ones are done counting, I will be off like a bird, looking for my family. They cannot keep us apart. Just as the soldiers finish counting, a bugle sounds in the distance. People are returning from the fields near the fort. A big crowd hurries toward us, breaking into a run. People rush toward each other, laughing and crying, searching for their relatives. Kaiba and I begin to run. Mother! Father! Where are you? Uncle! Aunt! Cousins! I see a woman who looks like my mother from behind. Her dress is even the same faded brown. I run up to her, throwing my arms around her middle, but when she turns around, I see a hawk-nosed woman with wrinkled eyes. Father! Father! Calls Kaiba, holding out her arms. To the people running past. No one answers. We cannot see my father's tall, straight body and kind face. We cannot see Uncle's long legs or the short, plump figure of my aunt. They go past, and nowhere is a face that we know. Grandmother touches my arm and tells us to come with her. They will make shelters and a fire for tonight. Tomorrow we can look again. It is no wonder you could not find them, she says. There are so many people here. Aunt is busy draping blankets over the wooden poles, while Partridge Girl plays with Starlight and our dog curls in a heap nearby. Sani stretches out a hand to me, asking what happened, but everything before me blurs and washes away like water rushing over dry earth. I sink onto the ground, head in my hands. Micah I says that all the Dene are captured. The bugle wakes me the next morning. Kaiba complains that she's heard that noise too many times. Did she think things would be different at the fort? Just as on the long walk, we gather outside our blanket shelters to cook the flour for our morning food. Food is given out before sunset, and grandmother makes sure we save some for the next day. Briefly, Micah I stops by our group and crouches down to Kaiba's height. "How are you?" Kaiba smiles gently and answers, "Good." Grandfather is impressed and asks sister to find out how many of our people are at the fort. Kaiba stands and points to all the people she can see, then holds her hands up as if asking a question. Micah Eyes seems to understand and draws a circle in the dirt with squiggly lines on 3 sides, to show the rivers of the Dinata, we think. Then, in one quick swoop, he gathers every bit of dust from the circle in his hands. "He means all of us." Grandfather's mouth thins. He cannot understand how that could be. Then the soldier pats Kaiba again and hurries to join another soldier. Grandfather shakes his head and asks, "Did the white man find all of our people hiding in the mountains? Did he capture the Dene of Navajo Mountain and Black Mesa and a deep forever canyon near the place of the setting sun?" No one answers. Our men are taken off to work. Soon the soldiers order our men to follow them. Shouting instructions in our language, the Nakai struts like a courting turkey. Grandfather and Sani's grandfather do not have to go, as they are too old, but Uncle has to. High Jumper stands up, wondering what to do, and one of the soldiers drives him forward. He is not even a man yet, but he will have to do a man's work. Aunt, who gathers news here just as she did on the march, tells us that the men are going to dig ditches to water the crops that are already planted. The soldiers won't even give them time to recover from the journey. Kaiba grips grandfather's hand. "I'm glad you are staying with us," she whispers. I wonder if my mother and father are even in this fort. What if they didn't survive the journey? Or what if they slipped away during the night the way some of our people did on the way here, going home to the mountains? We hunt like hawks. That first day, sister and I help grandmother and grandfather clean our small place in the fort. We are crowded like bees in a bee tree, with hardly any space between where people sleep, rest, cook, and clean. With a piece of broomweed, I sweep the dirt around our blanket tent. Grandmother points out to us where to relieve ourselves, off to the side, away from people. I wonder if I will always live like this, pressed in among people this way, never having a space to be alone. We spread through the fort, taking up every piece of ground. Many, many more of us than were on the march. And that doesn't even count the Mescalero Apaches, our old enemies, who are camped in a different part of the fort. Together, Kaiba and I go from group to group, asking if anyone has seen my mother, Glemba of the Salt People, or my father, Lawn Mustache of the Bitter Water People. "No, child," an old grandmother answers us. "But I will ask, who are you?" We tell her our names and clans, pointing to our tent. But no matter how many shelters we stop in front of, no matter how often we ask, I cannot see my mother. I can't see my father. The men have bent shoulders. When the light slants low over the dusty ground, we hear the bugle far away. Soon the men appear, walking slowly with bent shoulders. High Jumper and Uncle walk up to us, breathing heavily. Uncle groans. "All day digging ditches out there. For what, I do not know. Others helped mix up clay to make adobe buildings. Not for us. Uncle tries to spit, but can't because he's so parched. Grandmother holds up a gourd filled with water she'd gotten from the river that day. It is not good water, but it is all we have. We must drink it. Sinking down to the ground, Uncle drinks deeply and sighs again. The beautiful place by the river. High Jumper's voice is hard and bitter as he says that the only true thing in that name is river. Beyond the fort, I can see it sparkling in the slanting light. I want to add that beautiful is true also, but I keep my mouth shut. Grandmother does not say hush, nor does grandfather. We are becoming bitter, like some weed in the field full of salt and poison that sheep will not eat. And when the soldiers give out the meat that night, grandfather distributes the pieces to people nearby. Uncle is too tired to do it. Even though grandmother has brewed him some sagebrush tea from her bag of herbs, it does not help utter weariness. It does not help heartbreak. I am afraid to find out about my family. The next day, the bugle wakes us again. We chew on tough meat and cooked flour. Again. The men go off to work, with High Jumper, while we try to clean the tent site. Aunt is worried about finding enough cliff rose bark to put under Starlight's bottom, and wonders if we are allowed to leave the compound to find some. When the Nakai comes back from the fields, Aunt says she will ask. Again, Sister and I go from shelter to shelter, peering into the darkness of the earth mounds, calling out our question. It is rude to enter a person's home without announcing yourself, so we always say that it is Sarah Nita of the Salt Clan and her sister Kaiba looking for their parents. But the wrinkled, sad faces we see, the tired voices we hear, do not belong to us. What do you think happened to them? My sister asks in a small voice. I cannot answer, and I feel like smallest one hiding in the bottom of the burrow, afraid to come out into the open. The next morning, I wake and see Sunny helping grandmother outside our tent. With sticks, they are beating our old blankets, making clouds of dust smoke up. Grandmother wishes she could wash everything, our rugs, blankets, us, even Silvercoat. Sunny wishes she could take a bath, and grandfather says we could use the river near the fort. But what if it makes the soldiers angry? Aunt wonders. Grandfather says we should just go wash ourselves. If we are not allowed to, someone will come to tell us. Gathering up our blankets, we head for the river. But first we must pass a soldier keeping guard. Aunt points to our bundles and to the river, saying, agua, the Mexican word. The soldier waves us on, though I do not like the way he looks at my two aunts. It reminds me of the way our men look at horses, thinking about how strong they are or how swift. We hurry past the adobe building to the waterside, finding a place near some cottonwoods to bathe. Other women are kneeling by the river, rubbing their blankets and dresses with gravel and filling their gourds. Don't take your dresses off, cautions one of the women. She tells us that some of the soldiers are cruel to our women, and Aunt nods. She knows what that means, but I do not. While I hold Starlight, my aunts and grandmother wade into the river, shivering at the cold. Even though it is the time of sudden spring storms, the water is not warm yet. Grabbing some gravel from the bottom, they scrub their bodies and dresses, dip in quickly, and let the water flow through their hair. Grandmother's long gray hair streams out, and when she comes up, her eyes are sparkling. Clean, she calls, wading onto the bank. She says she feels like a human being again. Sunny, Partridge Girl, Kaiba, and I wade in, rubbing our skin with gravel, then scrubbing our dresses. Aunt and grandmother keep watch over us from the bank, and I wonder what they would do if a soldier were cruel to us. Shivering and chattering, we hop up and down on the bank. As we get dry in the warm sun, I watch starlight try to grab the shafts of sunlight. It is almost a good day in this bad place.